West Coast Woman Power presents the Empowerment Podcast with your host, Alexis Taylor Middleton. Alexis Taylor Middleton created West Coast Woman Power to share in the traditional Mayan and Cherokee teachings of self-realization, empowerment, and personal wisdom through shared stories.
In honor of the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people, the Stanaas, Stanemo, and Stanemis nations. Welcome to West Coast Woman Power. I am your host, Alexis Taylor Middleton. It is through our stories our soul awakens with learning and shared wisdom. The honor is truly mine for all those who have come before me, each heroes and heroines within our stories. 9 years of traditional 5,000-year-old Mayan and Cherokee teachings have empowered me and shared wisdoms from others. This is the legacy I now pass on to you. How to empower yourself in your life journey through stories shared and wisdom shared. West Coast Woman Power is created in honor of the grandmothers first and foremost, mothers and children, the grandfathers and fathers. Furthermore, West Coast Woman Power is to empower each of you with wisdom and stories because we are worthy. Today, I would like to speak of fear. Fear, false evidence appearing real. How does this affect you in your daily life? For me, it began when I was in university. I had an enormous anxiety in speaking in front of crowds. And I was to do a debate. And I had to do a debate in front of about 150 students, and my colleague elected not to show up from an evening of partying. So I got to stand before the teachers and the students and give my debate. Absolutely afraid, and I realized that I had to appear as someone very strong and full of gumption, even though I felt completely small and afraid and unprepared. And I realized in going through life sometimes, how much do we live through fear? How much do we accept fear as part of our daily life? Now, standing in front of my colleagues and professors, I actually won the debate. That was great. But in daily life, sometimes with my children, I experience this fear. Am I doing enough? Am I being enough? Are they prepared enough? Am I protecting them enough? And I've had to really evaluate and take stock of the kind of individuals that my children are becoming and growing into, and realize that I must not be motivated by fear. Because not only can we put on a face or a facade or a mask to hide what's really going on inside, but I also really encourage each of you to look at what has been motivating you that's been causing you fear. Again, false evidence appearing real. Is there something that shows much greater than what it really is? Being a single parent, I was quite afraid for a long time that if I didn't give in to this and give in to that I would be left alone without any of my children, that they might go to where they could find yes instead of no. And I had to overcome inside of me this incredible fear that was almost paralytic at times, but eventually became transformative into being able to look at what is the worst case scenario. If I was able to have the courage and that quiet moment to assess what was the worst case scenario that could take place in standing up for what I believe in, or in saying no to this child or to that one, then I was able to face that fear, and most of the time without it actually unfolding. Because many times what we bring light to actually loses its power. It loses its momentum. This is what I share with you today. It's how to take stock and look at in what ways have you been living your life in fear, and how are you willing to move forward, because this takes immense courage. And I implore you, take that chance. Do little baby steps. I am an example of living through fear and finding a way to actually make fear my friend. What began to happen is I would look at how my relationship was with my kids, how my relationship was with my family and my friends and my employers, with myself, all these relationships. And I was so motivated by fear most of the time that I was almost paralyzed and would have heart palpitations. I'd be driving and suddenly have such anxiety that I would have to pull over because my breathing would become so labored. It was almost like my larynx, my throat was starting to close up. So it was getting to a point that I literally, for my well-being and my health, I had to stop and say, fear, what is it that you're holding on to? What kind of a power grip do you have on my psyche and on my being? One of the best pieces of advice was, as I just mentioned, looking at what's the worst case scenario. When I started to do this and ask myself this question, it began to allow things to uncover. And I began to find weaknesses in this fear that I had in front of me. And it began to weaken. And any time now that I'm about to step into something and I am so full of fear and so full of anxiety, I stop and I go, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen right now? As I do this, I become stronger and fearless. So even shaking and quaking in my boots, I went and did the West Coast Trail. I have a complete fear of heights. I have severe vertigo, and I managed to do the West Coast Trail. I even froze on a ladder at one point, and I wasn't able to move up or down because every common sense in me just shut down. And I literally had to peel my fingers off with a 40-pound backpack, climbing up this ladder on the West Coast Trail and peeling my fingers off the ladder to get to the next rung, almost retraining myself because I had such instantaneous fear that I couldn't even let go for fear I was going to fall down all these rungs onto the earth below. So what happened instead is I got very centered within me and I asked myself, okay, with one hand in front of the other, and I made it all the way up to the very top of the rung, only to have to find my way across a very narrow gulf on an even more narrow bridge, and I did it. But it was really uncomfortable. What I'm saying here is life is full of ups and downs. It's full of stress, and I have yet to meet someone who lives completely stress-free. Way to go. If they can be stress-free, my hat is off to them. So for the rest of us that get to experience the challenges of either daily or weekly fear or monthly fear, whatever it is, remember that, again, it's false evidence appearing real. What we see as a fear could be very exciting for somebody else. So that's why we sit back and we look at the fear for what it is. What's happening right now? What steps do you need to take to break it down, to make it something very tangible and very livable, very real, very concrete? It allows the bleakness of fear to become very small, very weak. And I implore each of you, and I encourage each of you to look at your life and see where the fears are. And if you're being motivated by fear, even if it's going to a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner, are you dressing a certain way or behaving a certain way so that you can stand out and feel supported? Or are you going to not go because it's an uncomfortable place and you're afraid of what's going to or what may come about? It takes, again, a lot of courage to just be who you are. And we can tailor it. We can be a bit calm with it. We don't need to put it into people's face. There was family once, many times, that I would clean my house top to bottom because I was afraid that they wouldn't come over anymore if they didn't see things as clean and organized and uncluttered. I was wearing the mask of fear of being seen as something other than what I wanted to be recognized as, which was a loving human being who was a very loving parent. And as it was, down the road, it didn't really matter a whole hill of beans whether my home was a certain way or not. There came a time when, for me, these people decided that I wasn't going to be in their circle. And so there was a form of alienation that took place. And I appreciate that because it taught me that who we are absolutely has to come from within. And if we have to behave a certain way for our children, for our family, for our peers, our colleagues, if we have to behave a certain way in order to garner respect, we need to ask ourselves, where is the real you? And why is that one hiding? I invite you now to step back and reflect on your own fears and to ask yourself that question. What is the worst case scenario with whatever fear or fears that you are facing? What is something that you can do? What steps may you take? This, again, is creating empowerment through looking within you. You have the answers. You have the ability. Sometimes we just require the tools in order to move forward. There is always hope. There is always hope.